Okay, a really quick update on events that are quickly spiraling out of control. I'm going to give you a quick timeline. I've just come across an article that I would really like to confirm, but it's too early to get anything other than military sources. So really quickly, yesterday, I think it was yesterday, there was a fire aboard a Russian experimental spy submarine. Where the Russian sub was is of some question right now. We can't confirm its location. However, it appears to be not far off the shores of Alaska. Some reports have said very close to American waters. It's possible that it was even in American waters. I cannot confirm that. Okay, so they evacuate the surviving crew and the fire aboard the sub. They're probably recovering the sub. Not sure what the whole deal on that is, but today there is a report from a website called Debka file, and be careful about them. They are an Israeli intelligence military website, former and active duty Israeli military, and with any military intelligence board, you're going to have disinformation as well as real information, and it's just one of those things. But they're often on the cutting edge, and when there is military information to report, they do well. They're not what I would call fake news, but just gotta be careful. They're not like Fox either. So what's being reported right now is that a Russian submarine was being escorted out of American waters. Okay? And during this process, it was intercepted by an American submarine. The American submarine attempted to escort the Russian sub, and another vessel that was escorting this Russian sub fired on the U.S. sub, scuttling the ship. Okay, I'm going to really quickly just read a little bit of this report so I don't get any of the details wrong, because this is huge news, and if this is true, we're on the verge of something very big. The headline is Urgent Consultations in Washington, Moscow on reported U.S. Russian submarines in firefight. This is on July 2nd, 2019 at 10:24. So I'm not sure what time zone they're in, probably in Israel's time zone. That would be this morning. First reports reaching Debka files, military sources say that a U.S. submarine intercepted a Russian nuclear sub in American waters opposite Alaska. The Russian sub escorting the nuclear submarine responded with a Balkan 2000 torpedo and scuttled the U.S. vessel. Urgent consultations in both the White House and the Kremlin were taking place on Tuesday night. U.S. Vice President Mike Pence called off an appearance in New Hampshire after being recalled to Washington for a conference called by President Donald Trump without explanation. Simultaneously, Russian President Vladimir Putin canceled an engagement and headed for the Kremlin to confer with Defense Minister Sergei Shoigu and military chiefs. After learning that 14 submariners died in a fire that broke out on a nuclear-powered, quote, experimental submarine in Russian waters, end quote. This account, carried in Russian media, varies in most respects from the first reports reaching this site and may refer to a separate incident. They report between 14 and 17 members of an AS-12 nuclear-powered submarine died of poisonous fumes caused by a fire aboard the vessel. The submarine was described as experimental and unarmed, but often used in spy missions. It is unclear how many of the 25 crew survived. Local media suggest 4 or 5 are receiving treatment in Severomorsk's military hospital for poisoning and concussion injuries. Another news account said that the majority of the officers died in or on their way to the hospital. These reports do not cite the cause of the fire. Okay, that's all we've got, guys. First of all, a couple of things. One, there is this fire that breaks out on a Russian sub. Now, I was aware of this story. I think a lot of us may have seen this floating around. I was also aware that Pence was recalled unexpectedly, that his flight was turned around mid-flight to go back to New Hampshire and recalled for an emergency meeting of some kind that we know nothing about. I've seen people speculating on what this might be, and there are a few different options, but this seems to be the most likely. Putin also is recalled. Both leaders are recalled to their capitals, are in urgent consultations. This is not good. Seems like what happened, and if I could guess, just a narrative, and perhaps this is wrong, we're going on very little information. Whether or not the Russian fire was an accident is a question we can't answer at this time. Perhaps it was, perhaps it wasn't, right? We don't have that information. But there's a submarine in distress that's experimental, high-value military intelligence target, right? That they do not want falling into foreign hands. Well, according to this, the problem took place in American waters. A U.S. submarine intercepted a Russian nuclear sub in American waters opposite Alaska. Right? So this is really significant. Perhaps this spy sub was on a mission and got into trouble. It's now being escorted back by Russian subs or Russian ships, and an American ship comes to intercept it, as would be normal policy whenever we find, a boat on fire in our territorial waters. That's pretty standard response. Somehow the situation escalates and the Russians actually destroy an American vessel. Okay. This is a big difference between shooting down an unarmed drone halfway around the world in international waters. This is a direct attack on American military assets in American waters. Again, we need confirmation. We need some kind of confirmation. I actually am inclined to trust what this website is saying here, but it's very hard to tell. We just don't have the information that we need to be able to say decisively what's going on. And even when we do, nations are going to report the information that supports what's good for their agenda. Okay, all this to say, there is a lot of tension right now around the world. The Middle East is a tinderbox that is about to explode, and on both sides there are alliances that have formed secretly and not secretly, defense agreements and others, and the flashpoints are going off. Incidents like these is exactly what geopolitical strategists are worried about when it comes to starting a nuclear war. Eyes on the skies, seriously. We may not have much heads up if this thing escalates any further. Just to remind everybody, there is a state-of-the-art Russian destroyer right now in Cuba, along with other military Russian assets in the Gulf of Mexico. There's also Chinese assets that they have placed near America. I've noticed that these are particularly aggressive moves. They happened at times, like for instance, the Russian sub crossed the Panama Canal into the Gulf of Mexico the next day after or the same day as the drone was shot down over the Persian Gulf, right? So if you can imagine what's happening right now, they're deciding how to respond, whether or not they're going to use a military response for that attack on an American asset. And as they're deciding this, Russia pulls in one of its biggest guns right into our backyard, right? Cuban Missile Crisis 2.0. This is what caused the Cuban Missile Crisis, by the way. So this is a really serious situation already, right? And now what we have now that we didn't have before is an actual American craft being downed in American waters by a Russian submarine. We really, again, need confirmation. If anybody has heard anything significant about this, if there's anything on social media or across the web, it would be worth putting down in the comments. I'd love to see what you guys can come up with. It's possible that this is disinformation, I suppose, but it's also entirely possible that it's not, and there's no reason right now to think that it is. All of the signs are pointing towards this being legitimate information. So plan accordingly. If war breaks out between these nations, there's a lot that goes into that. America's biggest strength is that there's a gun behind every blade of grass, but our biggest weakness right now is that they have the upper hand with hypersonic weapons, and right now we don't have the capability to shoot them down. This is a very serious problem. It means America is actually at a major disadvantage militarily to both Russia and China. This is the first time that we've been in this position ever, right? So it's not just a multipolar world, right? We actually have a major military disadvantage, and they lose that advantage that they currently have if they allow us time to develop and create counter systems to shoot down those kinds of missiles. So eyes open.